Hello and welcome to Switch Game, and welcome back to my top 100 games for the Switch of all time as of 2024. In this video, we'll be covering my number 71 through 80. If you're enjoying the content, as always, leave a like and sub. It helps out the channel immensely. If you see something on the list that you agree with or don't agree with, let me know in the comments down below, but as always, please do so respectfully. If you want a chance to win a physical copy of Bayonetta, all you gotta do is comment on this video and all the videos in the series, and I'll be pulling the winner after my number 1 is announced. With all that housekeeping out of the way, let's get into the list. This is my number 71 through 80. Kicking off our list is a Pokemon clone and one of my favorites, and that is Nexomon Extinction. The reason I like Nexomon Extinction, one, it has a huge variety of monsters to collect, maybe around 380, yeah, 380 is based on the back of the box. The other thing that it has that I really like is something called the stamina system. You see, every monster in your party, which you carry 6 of, has stamina, and it's different than health. Basically, you can only use a Nexomon so many times before simply it's just too tired to battle on. You have to manage your party knowing this, that eventually you're not going to be able to keep using your fire monster, you're going to have to switch to something else. And that system is really good because it takes away that leader issue that you get in Pokemon where you get your starter, let's say you start with Cyndaquil, you're going to use Cyndaquil throughout the beginning of the game, and by the time you get to the first gym, your Cyndaquil is so out-leveling everything else that it's basically all on Cyndaquil to beat the gym. That issue doesn't really happen as much here because you cannot just focus on one monster. You have to constantly cycle them out to manage that stamina gauge, and that's one of the things I love about this game. The reason this game is so far back though is honestly the battles just take too long. It's basically shooting each other with Nerf guns. There are still elemental weaknesses and strengths to be had, so don't get me wrong, you can mitigate it to some extent, but overall the battling just takes forever, and honestly it's one of the reasons I don't play it as often as I wish I could. That being said though, it's still my number 80 of top 100 games of all time out of 400 games that I own. It's still a great game, and if you're really looking for something that's going to scratch that Pokemon itch, but you don't want to play Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, which personally I don't blame you, go ahead and give my number 80 Nexomon Extinction a try. My number 79 is a game that I thoroughly enjoy because the story is so compelling for me, and that is going to be Ni no Kuni: The Revenant Kingdom. Now, Ni no Kuni: The Revenant Kingdom is the second game in the Ni no Kuni Switch line where Studio Ghibli, although they weren't directly involved, heavily inspired the artwork and music, and that's a great thing. It really does help with the storytelling that you're going to get here. I actually like Revenant Kingdom more because I didn't really like the monster catching aspect of Wrath of the White Witch, which I know sounds kind of crazy because I just gave Nexomon Extinction my number 80 and I love Pokemon games, but I really like games like this to be your typical turn-based or action RPG style rather than monster collection. You play as a king who sadly goes into a coma, and when he awakens, he's surrounded by a new world and he meets a king who has to win back his own kingdom from the evil Mausinger. It's a lot to say, but really it's pretty easy to follow. The story plays out really well, and like I said, the artwork, because it is inspired by Studio Ghibli, it just sells the story that much more. It's basically like playing an anime that you get to interact with. Overall, Ni no Kuni: Revenant Kingdom is a great game, and if you've never played it, I highly suggest giving it a try. The two games don't necessarily have to be played together, as this game takes place 100 years after the first one, but I would recommend both because they're both really good games. Again, it's just the only reason I choose this one over the first one is I prefer the combat in this one rather than the monster collection combat that is in Wrath of the White Witch. And that is my number 79, Ni no Kuni and the Revenant Kingdom. My number 78 is a game that came out when most of us really needed it. And the reason because the Advance Wars series was basically going cold. Days of Ruin didn't sell very well because they changed the entire art style and they took it away from the fun cartoony visuals and they made it more realistic. And most people didn't gravitate to that very well, and I don't blame them. Even for me, Days of Ruin isn't my favorite Advance Wars game, but it is still a great game on its own. I just think it didn't need the Advance Wars title. It should have been its own game in a different series, and they should have kept the Advance Wars with the cartoony graphics going forward, and I think it would have sold quite well. My number 78 is Wargroove. I really like the Wargroove series. I love the second game, but I still like the first one just a bit more, mostly because I like the story and the army units that you get to control here. The factions are a lot more fun in my opinion, and overall this package I just enjoy a little bit more than the second one. If you've never played Wargroove, it's a tactical strategy game. Think Fire Emblem if that's going to ring a bell to you. You move your units around on a grid and you battle other units in this really quick turn-based style, where your unit's going to take a shot, they get a chance to counterattack, and then so on. The thing that makes this game so great is the story. The story is so charming and easy to follow. It's not complicated, it doesn't try to be more than it's worth, it doesn't try to be too grandiose, it's just simple, and that's what makes it great. The characters are memorable, and the combat, man, the combat is just so good. The team behind this really understood how much Advance Wars gamers love the deep combat that comes in these types of games, and they really delivered. I would recommend that if you had to pick up a Wargroove title, I still think number 1 is better, so for me that's going to be the one I'm going to recommend, and that is my number 78, Wargroove. My number 77 is from a series that I never got a chance to play, mostly because the game's only released in Japan, and that is Super Robot Wars 30. This is a turn-based tactical strategy game, much like Wargroove, where you control mechs and Gundams. Normally, I'm not a fan of mechs and Gundams and things like that when it comes to anime, but my friends highly recommended I try this game because of the strategy that comes with it, and I fell in love with it. It's a great system. The combat has these really great animations where if you want to use your gun, it goes into this full like cutscene type thing where the character charges up his cannon and fires it, and there's just so many great animations that you just can't go wrong loving the visuals that they do here. It also has a lot of cameos from anime. I can only name a couple that I know, being Gundam and Code Geass. I don't even know all the other ones that are popping up. I'm sure I'm missing so many Easter eggs in this game, but it doesn't matter. The combat makes up for all of it, and the story itself is not that bad to follow, and that is my number 77, Super Robot Wars 30. My number 76 comes from a genre that I don't generally ever play, the visual novel dating sim. It's not a genre that I really like. I find them kind of boring, although if you enjoy them, that's perfectly fine. It's like reading a book on your Switch. That's just not why I play my Switch. But again, a friend recommended me this game because of how funny it was, and that is Love, Esquire. And I'm going to be completely honest with you, this game has me laughing throughout the entire story. For some reason, the way they deliver the lines and the dialogue, it just hits that funny bone perfectly. Speaking of hitting the lines perfectly, they actually hired a full professional voice cast to do the voiceover for this game, and if they hadn't done that, I don't think this game would be on the list. But because it has such professional voice acting, you believe every line of stupidity that is said by the characters, and that's what makes it work so great. It also has some turn-based combat, although I will warn you, the combat is mostly just to push the story forward, and it's not really the mainstay of the game. Some of the moves are silly, and there's one called, for example, Final Climax. You can put those words together however you wish, and you can make the meaning of that of what you will. But what I enjoy about the story is that you're not playing the mighty warrior or the great hero of the story, you're playing the squire of that hero, right? You're the one who has to hand him his sword when he needs it in combat. You hand him his shield when he needs to go on the defense. You're basically picking up the gold off the floor every time he defeats something. And even if you aren't a visual novel or dating sim player, I highly recommend giving this one a try if you want a good laugh, and that is my number 76, Love, Esquire. Setting a Trap into number 75 is a game based on an anime that I really like, and if you got the joke there, you already know that it's Yu-Gi-Oh! Legacy of the Duelist. Every day after school when I was younger, I would get home and turn on the TV so I could watch cartoons while I did my homework and ate my afternoon snack. Yu-Gi-Oh! Was one of the shows that was always on, and I fell in love with it. I was already pretty ingrained into Pokemon cards, so the concept of a card battler in an anime, that was awesome. I got the cards, I played with my friends, it was something I was highly into until maybe a few years ago when I finally let go of my childhood collection and I sold them all away. No regrets though, I still love the show, I watch it all the time. My wife hates it, she thinks it's too, oh my god, friendship, and that's perfectly fine. I understand the first couple seasons can be a little grating on the ears, but it's a show that I love going back to. I love it so much that over on my autograph wall, I have autographs from the voice actors of Pegasus, Yugi, Kaiba, Mai, and Joey. It's a series that will never get old for me. So for me, whenever they release a game for it, I'm on board. The issue is, and the reason this is held so far back is because they really push the new series on you in this game, and I don't like the new series. I don't really like GX. I can understand that that one's made more for kids than the original series, and the other ones where they're on motorcycles and whatever, they have no appeal to me. For me, I only enjoy the first 4 seasons when you're following Yugi and Yami. Other than that, I could care less. So for me, I only get maybe 1/4 of the game out of this because of all the other storylines they want you to follow. I still go through them every once in a while just because I want to see what the new cards do, but when I play a card game, I don't really want to read a college dissertation paper to understand what my opponent is doing, and for that reason, it sits here at number 75, Yu-Gi-Oh! And the Legacy of the Duelist. If you like John Woo movies and The Matrix, my number 74 is going to be right up your alley, and that is Hong Kong Massacre. In this game, you play a detective who has to go into building after building, getting rid of all the thugs and bad guys that are inside. What makes this game so fun for me is it's a one-shot and you're dead type of game, which means it's more like a puzzle game than anything else, but with the mechanics of an isometric shooter. Every time you open a door, you're going to learn a little bit more about the layout of the building. You'll eventually die, but now that you know the layout, it's a little easier to go further and further, and that's basically the hook of this game. It's not a very long game, which holds it back in my opinion, but overall the replayability is really high because after a few months, you're going to forget those layouts and playing it is going to feel fresh once more. If you really like isometric shooters, you like puzzles, and you like that concept of dying and repeating the level over and over a little bit more and more so you can finally get to the end, I really recommend my number 74, Hong Kong Massacre. Coming in at number 73 is a game that I love because it's a card battler, and I just got done telling you how much I love card battlers with Yu-Gi-Oh! And the Legacy of the Duelist. Basically, the way this game works is you build a deck of cards that you go into combat with, and each card has a picture of it. Maybe it's a sword, a shield, a spell, or an item. And you're gonna have to play those at specific times during the battle to make sure that you optimize their use correctly. And I am talking about Baten Kaitos 1 and 2 the remaster. This game is so much fun if you like that system. Every card has a picture, like I said. Maybe it's a sword. Well, when it's your turn to do an attack, you're gonna play that sword from your hand and it's gonna do some damage to the enemy. But the other thing that the cards have is a number. And if you played the numbers in sequential order or as pairs or triplets, you're gonna get bonuses to your score, whether it's damage or defense. And speaking of defense, it has this really cool system where when it's the enemy's turn, it's gonna show you what they're gonna do. They're either gonna attack you with a spell or they're gonna attack you with a physical attack. And you have about 2 to 3 seconds to pick a card from your hand to deflect it. You can use a weapon, but it's only gonna parry the effect a small amount and you might still take some damage, but if you play a shield or some armor, it might block all of the damage instead. It also has a really neat time system with your deck, wherein if you have a card of unripe bananas and you use it every once in a while, it eventually will become ripe bananas, which can heal you for even more than the unripened version, and sooner or later, as you guessed, it'll become rotten bananas, which have very little use at all. It's a system that I really enjoyed, and it keeps you on your toes when it comes to deck management. I will say that I enjoyed the first game more, because in the second game, you have one deck that is shared between all characters, whereas in the first game, you get to micromanage each player's individual deck. So for me, number 1 beats number 2 in terms of the fun factor with those deck building mechanisms. I would highly recommend to anybody giving these games a try if you like RPGs. Even if you haven't played a card battler one before, I still recommend giving this a try. It might be a good jumping point for you there. And that is my number 73, Baten Kaitos, number 1 and 2. Here at number 72, I'm kind of cheating again because it's actually 2 games, which are so close together that picking one over the other is practically impossible for me. These games take place in a galaxy far, far away, and they are Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2. These 2 games are phenoms in the Star Wars gaming library, sitting comfortably in my opinion by Battlefront 2, the original one, Rogue Squadron, and those devilishly difficult SNES games. The story has numerous branching paths that make one playthrough not enough because you won't see it all, so the replayability is on full blast here. The characters you meet along the way are some of the most memorable in the series, such as the sometimes noble Bastila Shan, the evil Dark Lords such as Darth Nihilus, and the hilariously dry HK droid who refers to humans as meatbags. I would rate these higher on my list, but it's hard to do so when these games have some really annoying controls, voice acting that is rather dated, and graphics that have aged about as well as the sequel trilogy. If all of these were fixed in, say, a remake, I am sure these games would be an absolute knockout. Thankfully, that was hinted at on the PlayStation in 2021, but no news has really been given out since then. I highly recommend playing both games, and so I can't pick either one as my number 72, so I guess that'll be my number 72 and 72.5, Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2. We've made it to the final game on my list, and that is Potion Permit. Potion Permit is a game that I play rather frequently when I want to wind down. It's a relaxing sim game much like Moonlighter or Harvest Moon, wherein you have to go out into the wilderness, battle monsters, and collect goods and crafting materials for your shop. You are the town alchemist, and it's up to you to help them with whatever ails them. At first, of course, the villagers are very wary of your support, but as soon as you start proving your worth, they come around and seem to constantly need you for something. The game boasts a large number of fetch quests and other types of menial tasks that keep you on the move at all times. Potion Permit also has a really fun minigame feature wherein you have to play mini-games in order to complete your potions that you are creating, putting blocks in the right place, or rotating them to make sure that they fit in the right pattern. The game, however, is a bit too easy, and there doesn't seem to be much of an endgame, at least not so far as I have found, putting in quite a few hours into it. It's still a good time though, and when I am exhausted after a mentally draining day, it's a nice simplistic sim game to pick up, and that is my number 71, and the final game on today's list, Potion Permit. Well folks, there you have it, my number 71 through 80 of my top 100 Switch games of all time as of 2024. If you enjoyed the content, do me a favor and like the video, and consider a sub if you want to see more. If you have a differing opinion about my list, let me know in the comments below, just please do so respectfully. I'll see you guys next time with my 61 through 70, and as always, have a great day.